Okay, so it's not in the way. I'm not cutting anything off, but we just kind of want it out of the way. And so I'm just going to kind of look at this leg, and I'm going to kind of look at this leg, and quite frankly, they both look lovely, right? So the other thing I look for is there damage on one of them, right? So if one side has damage, then you can use that for your deep side and start with superficial on the other, okay? But since these both look good, we're cool, okay? So in that case, if everything looks good and it's fine, then usually what I end up doing is I just try to do it so that it looks like the picture in your book. Because why do it the other way unless you have to, right? So if you notice the book picture, right? So the bunny's left side is superficial. The bunny's right side is deep because they cut a couple muscles and like folded them back to see the deep muscles. So that's what we'll do. Since this bunny, both sides are fine, right? We'll do that, okay? So, hey, look at that, right? This will be our superficial side. Okay, so there's not a ton to clean off here. There's this weird little blood vessel thing. Make that go away. All right, so there's two superficial muscles that we're concerned about. One of them is this lower part of the thigh, and it's colored green in the picture. What is that muscle called? Gracilis. Okay, so the gracilis is right here. It's this whole muscle. It's very wide. It's a very broad muscle, but it's very thin. So when you're working on kind of lifting these up and making these look pretty, you want to be very, very gentle, okay? So just by kind of rubbing my finger over it, I can see where the edge is, right? There's like a line kind of right there.
Right.
You guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's also a line down here that kind of goes around like that, okay? So what I usually do is notice how I'm not using I'm not using the scalpel, because this will kind of scratch it, but it won't like cut it. Because remember, the scalpel cuts through everything, right? But this kind of will scratch away at the connective tissue without, if I'm gentle, without damaging the muscle. And then what I can do is kind of, so see how I'm just really gently, see how thin that is? It's like paper, yeah? So really thin, and then once I kind of get in there, I can get my finger in there, and then I might end up kind of following along that line, right? Don't cut unless you can tell where the line is, but I can see the line going like this, so I'm just gonna kind of trace along where that line is, yeah? Oh, look at that. So see how thin it is? It's so thin you can almost see my glove through the muscle, right? So it's very, very thin. So don't dive too deep, right? You just start lifting up the edge and then just it's right there, okay? Now, do you guys see where you can see my glove poking through?
Yeah.
The color of my glove? So that's the end of the muscle, right? So now, don't do this if it's somebody else's hand, only do it if it's your own hand, okay? So it's never good to like cut towards yourself, but if I see it and then I pull my finger away, and then let's just check where we were, right? Don't do that if it's somebody else's finger, because at least if it's your own finger, you know how close you are to your own hands. What are you doing with somebody else's? So don't cut each other, okay? So look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Right? So all I did was I just kind of lifted up the edges to make it look a little cleaner. All right? Now, one of the ways to use this table while you're learning the muscles, so a certain amount of this is you just got to memorize, right? Origin, insertion, action, that stuff. But you can also use it while you're dissecting to kind of help it have meaning. So it's not just like, oh, I'm memorizing words on a flashcard, but what's the meaning? Okay? So when I look at the gracilis, I go, okay, so that's the gracilis. And it says the origin is the pubic symphysis, the insertion is the knee. What do origin, insertion mean? So those are where the muscle attaches, what it's attaching to, what bones it's attaching to. Okay? And so the origin is the attachment point that does not move when the muscle gets shorter. The insertion is the attachment point that does move when the muscle gets shorter. So if this is my muscle, if this gets shorter, right, this is going to move inward, yeah? So that's why the pubic symphysis, the front of the pelvis right here, is the origin, and then the insertion is the knee, because that's the end that moves, yeah? And then after that, it also tells you what the movement is, what the action is. So the movement, it adducts the leg. Well, we haven't talked about this. We're going to do this it'll be at the very beginning of lecture on Monday is when we'll talk about this stuff. So this is adduction of the leg.
To the middle line?
So
Abduction.
adduction means moves toward midline, yep.
And then
Okay, so
abduction is,
away.
yeah,
So we'll do all the movements and stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit on
Monday.
Monday. Okay, so anyway, so that's that, okay? I'm gonna try to do the same thing with my sartorius. So can you see the sartorius? What color is the sartorius up there in the picture? It's blue, and it's kind of a thin strap. The sartorius is so delicate, it's ridiculous, okay? So can you guys see, it's about as wide as this is. Can you see like a little strap that's coming down like that? You see it? It's so thin, right? It's even a little bit narrower than this. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did with that. I'm just gonna kind of start by, that worked very well. It's very thin too, so I'm not cutting way down. I'm just gently kind of lifting it. Come on, under there. Oh, that was almost bad. I know, right? They're super delicate though, like it happens, right? So if really thin muscles like that get a little bit of a, nick in them or whatever, don't beat yourself up about it because it's really hard.
And that's going towards the patella, basically.
All right, so see how I trying really hard not to rip it, but it's stuck to the muscles underneath it. Anyway, I'm not gonna mess with it anymore because if I do, it'll rip, right? But you can see that, right? So that's that. Okay, so don't mess with it anymore. Okay, it's fine the way it is, right? So that's the sartorius. Okay, so for this side, that's all we're doing is just kind of clean up the edges of those so that you can they pop out a little bit more. Okay, and then on this side, I'm gonna do the same thing I did over there, but I'm gonna do it a little bit faster because now I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just gonna do. Alright, so start here. Alright, and so on this side, you'll notice if you look at the picture, on this side they have cut both the gracilis and the sartorius in half. And the reason they cut them in half is so that we can see the muscles underneath. And the reason that they cut them in half rather than removing them is so that you have context, right? So, you could just as easily just cut these muscles off and make them go away. But the reason to cut them in half and leave them there is so that you can put it back together and you can be like, oh, yeah, that's the gracilis, that's the superficial one, and then I open it and I'm seeing deep stuff, right? So by leaving them attached, right, you have context that you wouldn't otherwise have. Okay, so there's my gracilis. Right, and so you notice I'm lifting it up exactly the same way as I did before, but this time, once I get it lifted up, I'm just going to take my scissors, and I'm just cutting right through the middle. Right, so I can fold it this way and that way. And I gently just kind of push it back. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my sartorius. Now the sartorius, because it is so delicate and so thin, sometimes when you're doing this, it just falls apart and disintegrates on you. So if you lose your sartorius on this side, don't sweat it at all because it happens. Because they're just super delicate, right? So see how I'm trying to do this as gently as possible? Because I would like to cut it and fold back this half. Yeah, and then I'm going to kind of gently pulling that away and okay. All right, so we folded back, right? And now there's this I don't know, coagulated blood, crud, whatever. So we just kind of wipe it clean. Yeah, and then the first thing to do seriously with the deep thigh muscles is to just kind of rub it, and you'll start. Whoa! I rubbed and there was a hole, right? So this is the bottommost muscle. So if you look at that picture, there's a red muscle, semimembranosus. So this guy is the semimembranosus, right? And that's what it is because it kind of dangles, right? And so, like I said, I just kind of pushed on here and it just separated right away. Okay. Above the semimembranosus, the semimembranosus, by the way, I should mention, is one of the hamstrings. So a lot of times when we talk about muscles, we're talking about functional groups, right? So when you're doing an exercise, you're working on building strength in your hamstrings, as an example, right? Well, there's 3 different muscles that we collectively refer to as the hamstrings. And the reason we group them together is because they all work together, right? And so it's like, you're not gonna strengthen your semimembranosus without also strengthening your semitendinosus because they work together. And so those are all examples of the hamstrings. So this is one of the hamstrings. We'll learn the other hamstrings next time. All right, but whenever I ask about like muscle group, that's what I'm talking about, right? So for example, the 4 muscles that make up your quadriceps, same thing, okay? So this is one of the hamstrings. Above the semimembranosus, there's one that it kind of has a dent in it, but notice when I poke on that dent, it doesn't separate, right? So this big muscle that has a little bit of a kind of a dent, but the dent doesn't separate, is the yellow one in the picture. So this is the adductor magnus. Now, if I push on the adductor magnus up here, oh, look at that. That practically jumped apart. I didn't touch it with anything sharp. I just poked at it with my finger. Yeah? So this whole thing is the adductor magnus. It just kind of has a dent in the middle. Right? And then what's above the adductor magnus? We keep working our way up. So that's the adductor longus is next. Okay? And then I'm just going to kind of poke again. And okay? So I'm just kind of, doing this. Right, and I see another separation right here, yeah? Okay, so this, what was this one again? So this is the adductor magnus, this is the
adductor longus.
Adductor longus, and so what's the one above the adductor longus?
Adductor
brevis. So let's talk about what that word brevis means. Think like abbreviated, right? Brevis means short. Okay, so we've got a big old adductor, magnus. Then we have a long adductor, adductor longus. Then we have a shorter adductor, adductor brevis. Okay? And then above the adductor brevis is pectineus. And so notice how that's another one where I just kind of poked it with my finger. So this one is the adductor brevis right here. That is the pectineus. So they're all kind of going the same direction. So semimembranosus, adductor magnus, adductor longus, adductor brevis, pectineus. Okay? And then the last one we're going to worry about today, and then we're going to have to clean up in like 5 minutes. So you guys aren't going to get to do this, but at least you saw the demo. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to grab this pair of blood vessels. So this is an artery and a vein, and they're totally in our way. So I'm just going to snip them kind of close to the knee. And that way, if I leave a stump, there's something for me to pull on, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out of my way. Now, the next muscle that we're looking for is called the iliopsoas. And so it is spelled like, it looks like, the way it's spelled, it looks like it's pronounced iliopsoas. Hold on. Right, so see how I'm pulling this back? So watch what I'm doing, don't look at the picture yet. Right, so I'm pulling this back. Right, and so I'm pulling until I get the blood vessels out of the way, and until I can start to see a little muscle down in there. You see that little muscle down in there? That little guy right there. Now you can see it a little better. Okay, so that's called the iliopsoas. So this little guy right here is the iliopsoas. So it's spelled like iliopsoas, but the P is silent. You cannot see it in this picture, and the reason that you can't see it in this picture is, do you see where how the sartorius is cut in half? Mm-hmm. Do you see where the top piece of the sartorius is? Right? So if we could reach into the picture and pull it back, the iliopsoas would be underneath it, right? So here's my sartorius. It's looking kind of sad and mangled, but there it is, right? So there's my sartorius. When I pull it back, my iliopsoas is underneath it. So that's the iliopsoas right there. Okay, so let's go through one more time. It's a little wet, so it's kind of shiny and hard to see, but let's go through it one more time, right? So, let's close the whole thing up. Okay, so this big guy that's cut in half is the gracilis. The skinny guy that's cut in half is the sartorius. Good. They're intact on the other side, yeah? This is the semimembranosus, which is one of the hamstrings. This big guy that looks like it's in 2 parts is the adductor magnus, adductor longus, adductor brevis, and then after the adductor brevis is the pectineus. Notice all of these are going the same direction, and then above that is the iliopsoas. And the iliopsoas, the way you can tell the iliopsoas and the pectineus are very similar in size. The way you can tell the difference is the pectineus is going like this, the iliopsoas is going like this. So they're perpendicular to each other. So iliopsoas is kind of going up and down, pectineus is going side to side. Okay? All right.